Thank you all for coming, and I'm really touched by the speech Anne gave. And anyway, I'd like to thank the Owens Gallery for hosting this presentation, and Struts for being involved, and the University of Mount Allison for inviting me to actually come here. And Leah has been quite wonderful in liaisoning and facilitating my being here. I'm very excited, especially looking at the program that's going to take place, starting with the Marathon of Drawing tomorrow, and there's also the workshops and the studio visits and the symposium. It's going to be full, and it's great, and I love to just feel the energy that's here from all of you being present. Anyway, so I'm going to give a talk on my work, and it's broken down into, I would say, different phases. And it starts way back in around 1994. And the first image I'm showing you is quite telling in that I'm interested in what constitutes an image and how it's generated, where does it come from, and what does it mean. And I've actually shown this image many a times, and last February was the first time that an art historian at the University of Ottawa reprimanded me for not stating who this artist was, and I couldn't tell you. I tried looking for it, but I could never find the information. Anyway, I quite liked it because it's almost like there are images or spectral elements locked in your brain, and they can be unleashed at any moment. I like to think of drawing in that term, and from 1994 on, I've been making drawings, and there are different strategies I've been using. I'm trying to think of ways that will make me feel energized, engaged, not bored. And one way was trying to make drawings at intervals of 3 minutes. And this began with just a piece of paper and nothing else. The idea is that I would make drawing with a timer. Every 3 minutes, I would make another drawing. And just to see what's inside my head. Obviously, these images are not just there locked in. They somehow play with the mark material, the paper, and what I'm actually being involved with in the environment. But the most I've done consists of 250 drawings times 2, so that's 500 drawings in 2 days. And it's pretty exhausting. It's like a marathon. And at the end, my wrist was sore, and I felt nauseous. I couldn't draw for many days. But I wanted to push and see how far I can go. The idea is that while I'm drawing, because it's so fast, it feels like there's no censoring involved. And I like that sense of freedom. And also, anything that I make that's bad, I can just blame it on the time that it took to make the work. And I use fairly inexpensive material. They consist of acid-free paper that you buy from an office supply store. It costs $8 for 500 sheets. So at the end of the day, if I made 2 drawings that are pretty interesting, I'm happy. What I like about drawing is that it can be very small, very intimate, very fast. At the same time that with these units, I can build them up into larger sections. And in fact, at the Strut Gallery, I show some of these drawings. Or this way. With the larger ones, they actually come from the smaller ones, and because they're more linear, I'm able to make projections and expand them so that they form part of a structure. So there are lots to see, but the larger images kind of settle everything down. I find that if I show a wall full of just small drawings, it's quite dizzying, and it could be overwhelming. So the best part about working this way from a time period in terms of exhibitions is that all of these can be placed in a shoebox, and I just take them with me on the plane and just install them. In 1996, I went back to Taiwan. That's where I was born. I left Taiwan when I was 11 years old, and I really wanted to go back because through my drawings, I felt that there's an overwhelming sense of fear and vulnerability. And I thought, well, what caused all that? And I recall as a kid that ghosts were abound. I was constantly reminded of ghosts in that if I didn't do something, my parents would use that tactic to scare me. So I thought, well, I should go back and explore the sense of ghost. And So I spent 4 months in Taiwan. I would say it's very formative for what I'm doing even to this day. So there's kind of like I don't know what they're called. Tongki is the Taiwanese word for this figure. He's actually going into a trance by first hitting himself with this weapon. The reason he's doing this is he wants to show you that the wounds that are generated through this, I would call it a performance, that the wounds are not mortal, that he's in fact possessed by a good spirit, not an evil spirit. Therefore, he will survive and the wounds will recover. So once he goes into this trance, he actually starts to speak in gibberish, and someone, in fact, can translate this. And they're the words of gods. In Taiwan, I really felt that, like most societies, you need to hold on to something to appease your own sense of uncertainty and fears. And reading the future is a good way to know the future. This woman, you can see that every mold on her face tells a story, or can tell a story. I also like the drawing quality. Same as here, there's a palm reading shop. Every line has a potential story, and it goes from gambling, horse racing, to car crashes and suicides and murders, and just goes on and on and on. It's pretty fecund for your imagination to latch onto. The Taiwanese also have lots of rituals, and they burn ghost or paper money to appease the gods, the ancestors, and the demons. And it's literally a 24-hour marathon of just burning these money. The smoke goes up in the air, and somehow the ancestors, the gods, and the demons would receive these gifts. They also burn offerings, usually made out of paper, and usually during funerals. They would consist of cars and houses and even maids. And most recently, they would include cell phones. So this is a furnace where they would burn. And I thought it'd be interesting to actually offer the possibility of just making a Visa card out of paper. They burn it once, and these deities and demons can spend it wherever and whenever they want. But it's not part of the ritual. They need to kind of physically do this. It's also really bad for the environment. Every time there's, I would say, a festival, the air is just filled with incense and firecrackers and smoke. Please feel free to ask questions. And I usually do a talk that's quite different, so I'm trying to figure out the gaps in between. So when I was in Taiwan, I didn't bring any materials with me because I just thought, okay, it's a land of culture. All the nationalists escaped there when the communists took over China, and the best of the scholars went there. And I thought, well, they surely would have lots of papers and inks and different kinds of materials. So I just resorted to using paper and ink. I was pretty frugal at the time, struggling artist that I was at the time. So I was being pretty stingy as well. I would draw on one side, and if I didn't like it, I would turn the paper over and draw on the other side. And to my surprise, some of my more interesting drawings, to myself anyway, were the ones that had a double-sided work. Literally, what I'm dealing with while I was in Taiwan for the 4 months is to experience the culture, trying to attend as many festivals and celebrations, going to temples. But then I would get back to my base and just draw. So all of these were just a mixture of my experiences and my maybe imaginings based on having lived there for the 4 months. And some are more direct as a kind of illustration of my experience or what I encountered. This one, I represented it as the unit of the family. In Taiwan, as in most Asian cultures, the family is pretty significant. And everyone had to be part of it. And they always tried to work so that the family goes further as a unit, and they would sacrifice themselves to make sure that happened. So here I took the hand to represent the family, and each finger a member of the family, and I severed the fingers and piled them up to suggest that they would do the sacrificial act to get to where they want to go. Also, just by having traveled, you really get to see the sense of constructedness of different cultures. How we would take something so seriously and other people will laugh at us because it's so weird and unusual. So I took on the idea that stigmatas, they may be self-generated. So here there's a finger digging its own hole into the palm to create a religious or spiritual experience. It's supposed to be funny. It's probably very gory too for some people. When I was in Taiwan, I came across a series of hell scrolls, and that was really enlightening for me because I had been dealing with the body, but this is the first time something clicked because I was trained in the Western tradition, looking at the depictions of hell in the Western world. And I realized how similar the tortures are. People are terrified of serpents. They're usually naked, and some kind of bodily treatment is being enacted on them. And there's boiling, there's cutting out of the tongues. In the Chinese, each punishment has a story or a reason why that person's undergoing such a torture. So it's very moralistic as well. And the reason apparently the Taiwanese have these hell scrolls is that anyone who has passed away, the family members can at any point ask a priest where their loved one is in the layers of hell. And they can point it out. So it kind of appeases the family to know that they're going through. And what's interesting about the Asian hell is that there's reincarnation involved. It's not hopelessly, infinitely suffering, all that. People actually come out, and even the best people will have to go through it to come out again. So there's always a sense of optimism and a sense of renewal, unlike the Western hell. This is a painting by Fra Angelico, The Last Judgment. So you can see here it's quite similar in terms of the representation of the body. And what's interesting for me wasn't so much of their suffering, it's that we will look at this, or I will look at this and say, okay, I will not do any of the things they've done because I don't want to be placed in that horrendous situation. So these were moralistic, obviously. And I love that devil at the bottom consuming a body, and that actually appeared in many of my drawings. So when I was in Taiwan, I really wanted to create an installation that dealt with the sense of ghost, but not in terms of the hauntings. I was interested in how ghosts is used in our society in terms of representing our fears, the moralistics, the sense of reprisals. And when I came back to Canada, I continued my research, and I was looking at films, reading novels. And one of the films that I saw was about a Japanese woman. I think her name is Oiwa, and she was killed by her husband, who's a samurai. And this story really touched me because and it's a classic story. It happens even in this part of the world, in that he met someone younger, more beautiful, and from a wealthier family. So he decided to leave her, but the leaving was killing her. And the killing wasn't just to cut her to shreds with his knife. He decided to poison her. So her death was very grotesque. Her body started to fall apart. You can see here that she became disfigured. Her eyes bulged out, her teeth fell out, her hair, when she combed them, they fell. It was very much like the atomic bombing in one person. And so I actually made a drawing paying homage to that woman, and I gave her many eyes, and they cascaded. So the idea is that if she did exist, she must have been very sad, and that when she cried, she would just flow rivers of tears because she had so many eyes. Now, at this point, when I started to draw, I used the color green in my work because I thought, well, the Asians or the Chinese, I'll say the Taiwanese, they think the color green is the color of ghosts. And I'm always interested in how facts and fictions correlate. In this case, my kind of, I would say, very home-based research would say that because bones phosphorize, and when they come up in cemeteries in the olden days, people would just think, oh, that's a ghost. So I thought maybe that's why they use the color green. And so I started a series of green drawings on a very thin paper called silk tissue. It's Japanese paper. And so I probably made 400 of these drawings. So they were based on my imagination and having done all the research. And as you can see, I really love Japanese woodcuts. But when I'm drawing, I'm not looking at anything. I'm just drawing. So anything that I've seen kind of get filtered through. And I also started to look at real-life history, because I thought, well, those were imaginary ghosts in a way, and what really haunts me perhaps are the violence that had been enacted upon the human beings on Earth. And it's kind of trans-historical, because what happened then, this is part of the Nanjing Massacre, it happens continuously. So in a way, time is compacted, history is compacted in a way that, that thing is happening at this very minute, that Iraq is and all that, everything. So I decided that I should do another series of drawings, and they would be black, because they represented the ghosts that haunt me. And I used ink on a very thin tissue paper. The minute I put a mark down, I thought the marks were really too thick and too material, too object-based. So I decided to play a little bit with my ink. What I did was I took a sheet of tissue paper, I wet it, and then I took another sheet of paper and I wet it as well. So now that I have 2 layers of tissue paper, I would draw on the top layer very quickly. And the ink would actually go through and travel through the interstices of the 2 papers. And I would then peel off the top one and use a hairdryer and stop the bleeding of that paper. And then I would go back and add a little bit of black ink here and there just to add a little bit of contrast to the work. And that's how I did this series of work. So with this series, I was actually looking at real images from the Holocaust, from famine, anything, everything that I felt haunted me. And then I thought the black drawings were also representational. What can I do? And I decided to actually put the 2 together, because they're both very translucent pieces of paper. So when I did that, I thought maybe that's where the real ghost is, whatever that means, in that it takes an imagination and a reality to come up with some other dimension. And also in this work, formally speaking, because there's an overlapping of 2 images, it feels like the viewer has an opportunity to make sense of the images or recreate one. They're also very small. They're about 9 by 12. This is 1997, and was a show at Obero during the ice storm. And for this installation, I had light bulbs that were strung unevenly throughout the space. So if you're looking at the drawings, you may bump into one. So your sense of presence is you're very consciously aware of your presence in the gallery space. And also what I did was, with these drawings, I would pin the 2 together. The black one's always underneath, like the real ghost, and the imaginary one's on top. The pins that I used, I would pin the top 2 layers together, and then pin the lower layer, but only of the black drawing. So the top one is floating a little bit. And as you walk through the space, you would trigger a motion detector. And when that happens, all the lights would turn from the white to green. And when that happens, the green drawing seems to vanish. And at the same time, a ceiling fan picks up, and it starts to blow, and the top layers come up. So in that instant, the imaginary ghosts give way to the real ghost. Now, I didn't invent this way of playing with light and color. It came as an accident, and I really celebrate accidents and mistakes that come into my art-making practice, because they're the points where something new can come about. I was actually making a series of blue drawings, and I thought if I were to light the drawings with blue light, I would enhance the blueness of the work. And to my surprise, the blue drawings seemed to have vanished. So I thought, well, okay, I'll keep that in mind, and I can use it for something else. This is the other side. And the drawings aren't gridded like my previous drawings. They were laid out like bricks, so they kind of overlap. Because when the wind hits the ground, it comes up on the wall, then it has to go through the channels to raise all the drawings up. So I was kind of experimenting with how the drawings would actually flutter. And the top layer had to be wrinkled so that they weren't stuck to the wall. Plus, they created a more of a, I'll say, refraction of the surface, so you couldn't see the black drawings underneath as clearly. So they were serving different purposes, the way I work formally. And these drawings are life-size, and they were based on images I saw of Hiroshima survivors who actually drew the victims that they saw. When I saw the drawings that were made, I said, they are the ghosts, because their hands were outstretched, their hairs were standing up on ends, and I actually distorted and changed the images because I couldn't appropriate them. I just couldn't do it. Anyway, a friend of mine saw this work, and here the real ghosts were in the midst of walking underneath the imaginary ghosts. When she saw this, she said, it's like an opera. And I thought that was kind of interesting because I've never thought of my work as being narratively based. And then I started to think about how I can actually include that in subsequent work. This is another view. At Obero, I don't know if you've seen the space, but the office used to flow right into the gallery. And I wanted to separate the two spaces, so I built a wall. And I made the door my size. Literally, it's like 5'9.5" by 1.5 feet wide. So people had to go through this threshold. And they were really consciously aware of going through. And one of the curators in Montreal actually said, oh, I get it. We have to enter your body inside in order to get inside your head. I thought that was kind of poetic. And even going through the first layer, there's another screen of green silk. So you saw everything as kind of fuzzy and dreamlike. So there's a sense of anticipation going into the work. And once you're in it, you're really in it. One thing that was also unsuspected is that if you're there by yourself, when the papers flutter, they create these scratchy sounds on the wall. It's kind of uncanny. But what I really wanted to do was to create an art experience and not a Disneyland haunted house experience. So that was challenging. Another thing was, because the door is quite small, it played with a sense of perspectives. When you're at the back of the space, it felt like you were twice as far inside the space as you normally are. So it was quite disconcerting for some people. So going back to the sense of narrative, I was also looking at Henry Darger's work at the time. He would be one of the masters of making narratives. He has the world's largest unpublished novel, 10,000 pages, I believe. What I liked about his work is that he dealt with these little girls called the Vivian sisters. They're small and they should be vulnerable, but in fact they fight these Nazi-like soldiers. So they're in constant battle. And he also, at this point, was really engaging with the viewer, that he would have these cryptic notes written by these girls, and they're actually addressing the viewer, telling them what's happening in the story. This is now 1999. I was in Holland, and I had to do a show, and I decided to think about the narrative, and it was kind of cliche, but I had to start from somewhere. It was a battle between two different beings. One was land-based, one was water-based. This was Holland, so I thought it was kind of site-specific. When I went through the museums of Holland, like everything was about history, and history consists of wars and killing and power struggles. And I thought, well, Holland is really, in a way, fighting with the ocean or the sea. And so I made up this fictitious two groups of beings combating. And in fact, it's a happy ending in that because the war was so long, they beget these offsprings that are half human, half kind of sea creatures. So they couldn't fight anymore. The way I draw is kind of interesting too. What I do is I would put some marks on a piece of paper, and because it's water-based, ink or flash is like a gouache. Before the paper, the materials dry, I would take another sheet of paper and I would kind of just press on it and move it around, and it would generate marks. And from that, I actually make the work. So they're never premeditated. The only premeditation would be they're going to be kind of land-based or sea-based or cannibals or something. But it's so it's always a surprise when a drawing comes, and it's quite delightful because that's what, to me, art is about. It's the sense of unexpectedness, taking chances. This is just using acrylic with a lot of transparent medium, and the material is really squishy, and I can push it around. And this is what I did. I took some of my more interesting drawings and I made them into a mural-like work. The ceiling is 27 feet or almost 8 meters high. And it represents the climax of the story, and there are over 400 drawings to the right. As you walk into the gallery space, you don't see the smaller drawings until you're closer to the wall. So I like that sense of discovery. And this piece actually was very informative in the way I started to make installations. One of the artists I looked at when I was thinking about how to create a space where viewers can actually experience physically through the work, Jonathan Borofsky. I liked his play of scale, different materials used, and also that there's certain works, you can only see them at a vantage point that's dictated by him. So things kind of come together when you're right at the right place. And a lot of times there are things on the floor, you don't know whether they're garbage or they're work by the artist. And I like that too, kind of confusing the space between the viewer and the art and the gallery. As you can see, I'm constantly looking at different works. Partly for inspiration, partly just because I think they're really wonderful works worth noting. And this one's by Bosch, Garden of Earthly Delight. The area that I drew to first was actually down here. It's this guy bent over and someone's sticking flowers in his butt. I thought it was kind of playful, but it also talks about here, this is kind of very hedonistic, and there's a celebration of the body that would be seen as totally taboo and immoral. I was also drawn to the pool in the center, which is here. It's actually a fountain of youth. And there's just this fear of mortality and of aging. You know, it hasn't dissipated. And people are still trying to buy the best creams and the best lotions and try to stave off the eventuality. So there's a sense of the betrayal of the body that maybe we're afraid of. I made a piece, and this is the first time that I actually used glassine, which is a fairly strong material. You can put color on it. It can be very grand. And here I represented heaven, earth, and hell. And it's a piece where you can actually go into. It also had sound. And this is how you go in. You have to crawl. And my studio space is actually very small, so everything I do is in sections, and the sections are dictated by the size of the paper. In this case, each paper is 5 feet wide, so I would glue them together, roll them up, color one section, roll it up when it dried, and color another section. So everything is just seen, you know, piecemeal. So when I set it up, it would be the first time I ever see it. And in fact, a technician at the time said, "You're looking at your work as if you've never seen it before." And I said, "I've never seen it before." And what I didn't realize was how three-dimensional it was. You know, in my head, I have to kind of walk through it, but it was physical. I was surrounded by color and sound, because when you part the paper, the yellow section, you go through this passageway, and the paper just kind of just go past you. And even bending down to enter this space, it felt like a three-dimensional landscape where there are vistas, beyond vistas. Usually everything's in 2 layers, color front and back, so that there's an added, I would say, saturation of color. Everything's very intense. And the lower part is a pool. It's mimicking the Fountain of Youth. Everything's made out of glassine, which is like a paper. And I have little crumbled up figures, old figures, in there. And I took advantage of the duct where the air was coming out. I piped the air into that area, so all these figures are kind of just fluttering a little bit. And if you were to go in, you would explore the drawings that are on the paper walls. And if you enter yet into another layer, you can see the blue there, you would come up to a set of 5 figures. They're nearly life-size, and they represent the youth that these are the figures who have taken a bath in the Fountain of Youth. Here, this work is slightly interactive in that if you were to press your hand on the body, and I don't tell people that, they have to figure it out, right? Otherwise, everyone would be touching the work, but the older self appears. It's in 2 layers. And as you let go, it goes back to the previous work. So that's that. And this is another work that I did. And at the time, I started to actually buy Inuit drawings. For one thing, I feel contemporary Inuit artists are undervalued in our society. And they're paired with the historical artists. And in fact, they make some of the most interesting works. And they were so inexpensive. And I started to buy some. But not this artist. She's like one of the titans of the Inuit world. Irene Avalakiak is her name. And she actually makes drawings and prints and also felt work. What I liked about her work is the fact that she creates a very different kinds of space. Here, the positive and negative spaces are kind of ambiguous. You can see that there's a background, and even within the bodies of the figures, there are figures. And there's a sense of repetition of motifs, which becomes patterned and, in a way, decorative, but they were always meaningful. When I read her story, she actually mentioned that if she were to encounter the sense of danger, she can actually transform herself into a wolf and run away from danger. I like that sense of empowering yourself, finding a way out. And she also added that if she couldn't run fast enough away from danger, she can turn herself into a bird and fly away. I think in this world, to survive, you need to negotiate, and she found a way. So I actually made a piece called Tracing Night. It was shown at Corner Brook and Halifax, I think. And it deals with the sense of fear, as well as the sense of wonder and magic that night can bring. And so I actually used a sense of repetition. I had these motifs of flying creatures gathering from one end to the next. This night, this coming of night, consists of 3 different kinds of darkness. One was created by these gathering insect humans. As they congregate, they darken out the sky. And there was also the normal day to night shift. So it goes from light blue. It's hard to see from there, I think, but it goes to a fairly dark blue. And then in the back are these humans afraid or they're fighting. So there's a darkness of the human soul. So I had the 3 dark or nights. I'm showing you a different installation shot. This was in Normandy. It was very dramatic because it was in a theater, so everything was dark. It really felt like it was night. And you can see here that there's an entrance for you to go in. In my story, and I would say at this point that I was quite influenced by Botticelli's illustration of Dante's Inferno, because he had Virgil and Dante walking through layers of hell. And they're there to kind of talk to each other, but to also inform the viewer what's taking place. So in my work, I have this little protagonist, and her name is the Rabbit Girl. So clearly, I was inspired by Irene Avalakiak's work about transforming. So here, she encounters danger. In this case, it's a pack of dog boys that are taunting her. So she's also in the midst of being taken away or consumed by darkness, and he's coming in the shape of that, or the form of the shadow. So as she's being taunted, she turns herself into a rabbit because she's still, the rabbit is kind of still vulnerable. That's because she is always vulnerable and innocent and naive, and that's all she can turn herself into. So we follow her. She gets consumed actually by darkness. There's a pack of dog boys. So the pink represents sunset or sunrise. When I'm telling you the story, it feels like I'm really trying to illustrate an installation, but I think it's more than that. When people come through, they don't get all these little details. I need to fashion all of these elements in my head so I have something to go by as I make the work. I think the next image is quite large, therefore it's hard to, oh, here it is. So that's the passageway. As you pass that pink section, you go through this passageway, and night is in front of you. The work is very architectural. At the same time, it's totally unsteady in that the minute you move, everything seems to sway through because of your body and the air current. So it has this kind of slightly topsy-turvy effect, dizzying. So inside, there's a rabbit girl again, and she's protected by these celestial beings. She's able to see the darkness around her, but of all these luminous creatures. So again, I painted both sides of the glass in blue, blocked out the silhouette or the outline of these figures so that they jumped out. All the lighting's from the outside, so it has this just humming blue, luminous quality. I don't know if anyone has seen this piece. You have? At Cambridge, yes. That was actually a nice place for it. Yeah. There was also sound with the work. So that's my take on the creation of the universe. What's nice about making drawings is that I can throw them onto Photoshop. So I can take a head from here, a body from there, and reconstitute a body. And then it just kind of adds on to become something else. So all of these images come from my really fast drawings. And as an artist, I'm always curious as to how I can keep a viewer engaged with my work longer. And one of the simpler strategies is to have a time-based element. In this case, I used a video. This is another drawing. It's a series of transformations, and there's a puppet. I call him the shaman boy, who's also a puppeteer, and he starts a chain reaction of transformations. So here I did a video of two figures, and they're actually two dancers. They're always moving, but I've asked them to never part, so they're always overlapped. As I videotaped them, as they moved, their bodies are always joined as almost one, and you see only the silhouette, and therefore you see sometimes a Siamese twins or a centaur. And it's also in slow-mo, so it feels like maybe it is a moon, and there are figures living in the moon, and they're enacting some strange ritual. And this is on your way out. It's a knight in the shape of a bulldog, and in his mouth there's a little paper tunnel, and you can see the little girl inside his stomach. Oh, that slide should be after this one. Anyway, this is the view going out. Same entrance that you entered. I went to Shanghai and Beijing 3.5 years ago, maybe. And it was my first time in China. I was quite thrilled. Everything was overwhelming. Everything was just amazingly amazing, surreal, I would say. I came across this paper cut, and it arrested my attention because previous to that, everything I saw was very cliched. They were all made for tourists, all the paper cuts I saw, and they were brightly colored. This one was special. It felt as if it was made not to be sold, but it was used in some ritual, some magical situation. This head hanging in the center of the tree reminded me of an engraving I saw years ago, a work by Jacques Callot, and he did a series of disasters of war, predates Goya's by 200 years. And I was quite arrested by that image just because of the trauma and the sense of the humanness of these, I would say, tortured beings and then hung to die. But it also, I'm thinking about lynching and everything else, how powerful this image, how it just brings a lot of things into my head. Anyway, with these two images in mind, I thought I should make some paper cuts. But going into the territory of paper cuts is kind of dangerous. It's always been equated with craft. And so how do I deal with that and not get caught up in the craft? Not that craft is negative, but I also wanted to challenge everything, art and craft. So I thought, okay, I'll make a paper cut that's 10 by 13 feet. And that's how I started. And the challenge was my wall space isn't that big. So I made 3 paper cuts that are white because I didn't know how to color them. Then when I did my 4th one, it was for an exhibition. I thought, well, I have to jump in and color it. So I did. And so this is how I cut. In my studio, vertically, I would manipulate usually a photo-based image, with adding it with drawing and Photoshop it through somehow, and then just cut away. I would say patience is not the thing that kills me. It's literally the physical act of cutting. So the finger gets numb, the shoulder gets sore, the back gets sore. I'm always changing my position so that I'm not injuring myself too badly. And it's also really hard to see when I'm cutting because I'm cutting white onto white so that I have to overcut. Every intersection has an overcut. Once I color it, I see all the flaws, and I have to go back and fix, meaning cutting out the overcuts. So it just takes a lot of time. So this is the first color piece I did, and it's 16 feet across by 8.5 feet high. I'm always trying to set a task or a challenge or a goal. So in this work, I wanted to present a totally symmetrical background tree, but the figures are asymmetrically placed. And the color that you see is the color that you see. It's not a solid, opaque color. It has layers of different hues to create a sense of, I guess, illusion of space, a sense of luminosity. And wow, can anyone tell me how I did this, making the figures asymmetrical?
Is the paper cut, is this a positive or the negative? Is the color the paper or the back?
That's right. That's a very, very good question. The black or the dark purple is the paper. In fact, if you see the white as the positive, then the thing will fall apart. It couldn't hold itself. Does anyone have any idea how I did this? Okay, I'll tell you the secret. Because my wall isn't this big, everything I cut, especially at this scale, I have to fold it. So what I did was I pre-made this image on Photoshop. I had 14 figures, and they all were, or I had 7 figures. Well, so when you fold this, they actually represent the 7 figures. They took up a place that didn't overlap another figure. So when I finished cutting it, I opened it up, and at this point, I have to roll half of it and turn it sideways to cut out the extra figures that I didn't want in the work. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So I projected another image of just the tree now without the figures to delete the figures I didn't want to be present. And the top left figure is the only figure that references Callot's piece. This is a detail of a smaller piece, so it's about 39 inches across and about 6.5 feet high. I'm playing with positive and negative space in that in the lower part is daylight, and bats are landing, and higher up they're congregating. And they actually overtake the leaves, and they consume the tree and create a darkness. And the top part shows that it becomes the night sky. And it's a real constellation. And recently I started to play with 3M reflector material. It's a material I used in 1997, in fact. It's quite a weird material because it's very luminous. It's the materials I see on bicycle jackets. Firemen have them. So they light up when you're in the dark and there's light shining on them. So this would be the largest colored reflector cut. And it's laminated onto shoji, Japanese paper. And so as you walk around the piece, it actually changes because it's never fixed because of the luminosity of it. And I can show you in the next picture in detail how here it looks kind of charcoal-y gray. And then further up, well, it doesn't really show that much difference. Anyway, there's a figure standing there, and there's a blue. In fact, from a certain angle, everything's indigo blue because there are layers of color applied to the work. And this is the first time I actually incorporated other people's images. I'll go back. It's hard to see, but in it, there are these ropes and heads and chains, and it's from a piece by Nancy Spiro at the Venice Biennale. I don't know if anyone saw her work. It's called The Maypole. Did you see it? And so it's in that, conflated into my image. And this is another reflector piece. And the reason you're seeing this kind of weird effect is because I used a flash and took the picture. And because there's ink on it, the way the light bounces back is very uneven, and it creates this really three-dimensional effect. This one's 2 meters wide. And this is quite a large piece that's not colored. Again, I'm using the reflector material. And at a certain point, it actually looks like cut steel. I'm trying to play with the figures in that, in this lower left corner here. They're branches, and also up here, they're branches, but I kind of overlap the figure so that they could become the legs, the extra limbs, or the antlers. So it becomes quite ambiguous. And then there are 2 or 3 figures hanging on the top right. And the lower figures here, you don't know if one's helping one to escape or taking it up to be hung in the trees. I think I always try to make my work fairly ambiguous so that it could be read both positively or negatively. This is an image from a very famous Chinese classic called the Mountains and Seas classics. In this book, and it comprises different books, it has creatures, geography, medicine, plants. And the way it's stated is as if these things actually exist and in an actual place. So all of these creatures have names, attributes. And I was quite fascinated with the fact that they're imaginary, but they're real, according to the people who made them. And they're passed on as they're real. When I was in Taiwan in '96, I actually saw some of the images. I didn't know what they were, but the images intrigued me enough that they kind of came somehow into my work, because I like the sense of the hybridized, the grotesque, the monstrous. And I actually see it that they have a way of empowering themselves in the world because they defy our judgment. They are who they are. Okay, it leads to this work. It does. It's a paper cut, and it was the first paper cut installation I did. The outside, it's 2 opposing spirals. So the outside layer in dark blue consists of 60 feet of paper cut. The inside one's in green, and it's 45 feet. This was actually shown at the Koffler, but at different spaces it just changes. So this is in Normandy. What I like about paper cut, unlike the glassine, is that when you shine light on it, it doesn't give you the glow, but it gives you the cast shadows, and it gives you the opportunity to see through the vista, so that you get to have glimpses of the subsequent layers, and the colors really play with each other. And also, because it is paper, and this is interesting too, because this was my first installation, at every step I'm taking a deep breath because I'm not sure what to do with it. I know for sure that with large sheets of paper, if you hang them in the air, and you try to walk past one, it's very unforgiving. It just has this very mechanical kind of presence. So I ended up having to wrinkle the whole surface to create, in fact, a hinge at every wrinkle. And then the wrinkle made the piece look like a piece of junk. So I had to go back and iron the whole thing flat again. But the wrinkles stay. It's that huge walls that disappear. So here, as you walk in, it just undulates because every section is kind of hinged.
Did you show this at Standard A?
Yes, I did. Yeah, it was very different there again because there was daylight coming in. It was a larger space, so it opened up quite a bit. And it didn't have the same shadows. What was I going to say? Because these papers are 1 meter long, about 39 inches wide, and they're all glued. When I wet it with ink, all the seams came apart. So I had to go back and kind of repair every section. That was torture, and that was patience. Oh, the way I set it up is I would have this PVC pipe on top. Everything's reinforced with acid-free fiber tape, and then sewn with Velcro or taped with Velcro onto the pipe, so that when I go to a show, I set up the structure, and then I just elevate the whole structure. Then I just Velcro the paper cuts onto the pipes, like here. So I'm mapping out the sections. This is, to me, the easiest and cheapest way to go because PVC pipes are inexpensive. If I go to Mexico, if I don't have the pipes with me, I know I can buy it there. I can Velcro it right there and then and set it up. And I travel with them. I cut them down to 5 feet length, put them in a sonar tube, and I take that with my insulation squished in a suitcase. So it's always been pretty, I would say, mobile, my works. So this is the other view. This piece, I was doing a short residency in Normandy, and apparently Mary Magdalene went through there for a time period. And what was interesting was at the time I made a drawing that I thought was Mary Magdalene, and I didn't know that she was there or near there at the time. So I decided to make a piece that kind of paid homage to her, this person who was kind of like an outcast, misunderstood. She had taken exile. She became a hermit. There are different stories about her. Apparently, she's even some queen of Egypt. You know, just these mythologies and stories follow or get renewed or invented and added onto through history. But I thought if she was going on a journey, maybe to find herself and to get away from other people, if she were to truly come to a place that's completely new and different, it would surely be completely new and different for her. And this journey would be both psychological, emotional, and physical. So this piece is about possibly going to a place where you've never been before. So in this place, the shadows move because you're moving, and because of different lighting. I don't know if you ever play with lights, but if you have several lights casting on the same surface, there would be several shadows, and they would look three-dimensional. So it felt like you were walking on the surface of floating lace. And I had all these paper tunnels built. I wanted something kind of outrageous and celebratory, like this is the place that you would arrive. And you would go inside. Well, in fact, it was redone because the night before I left, I actually built a cocoon for her like a hut, and it was all sewn together. And the minute I went to hang it, all the stitches became perforated sections, and the whole piece fell apart. So over the course of the night, I made this red thing. The tunnel's already made, but I had to remake the red thing for the show. So you would go inside, and through looking out, you're not really looking out, you're looking at the end of these paper tunnels, and you would see little creatures. So this would be the things that she would have never encountered in her life. It's quite, I would say, very sensuous, very seductive, because it's all color, it's all layers, and it's kind of magical because on the outside you see this thing, on the inside you see something else. And I've used this dog boy several times. You'll see him coming up later on as well. This is the exit from that little cocoon thing I made. And I just remembered, after I've taken this picture, that it looks like a classical Chinese garden. Some of the walled areas are in the shape of vases. And I was totally unaware when I made this. I just didn't want to do a kind of a loopy kind of entrance again. The way I'm interested in the grotesque is also fueled by the sense of the caricatures that were used racially. Anyway, so here's an example of the way the turn of the century, the Chinese, how they were treated or depicted. Because I'm also interested in the sense of representation, not only how things are represented, but the representation of the self. You can say, I'm this, but how you're depicted and how you're seen are can be complete opposites, like Obama, for instance, to the eyes of certain people. So here, there's a portrayal to obviously instigate fear and hatred and intolerance. And so I see making monsters or the grotesque as a way to overcome all this, as a possible way. So in my drawings, these are more developed. You can see the messiness because I'm doing this monoprinting. And as another strategy, 3-minute drawing sessions are really fast, and sometimes the drawings don't seem resolved. So what I've done is I would do a 3-minute session on a body of works, put them aside, and then weeks or months later, I would take the same drawings out and put another 3-minute layer on top. So there's a building up of 3-minute histories. So they become much more complicated and, in a way, very different from the other 3-minute drawings. So these are witches. Again, they are kind of outcast in a certain time, certain place. So these are kind of dedications to them. And if you were to ask me to draw a monkey, I can probably do it, but not as well. Here, following the mess, and I see it almost as if I'm playing tennis, that I would toss a ball, that's like putting the mark down, and then by pressing on it, the ball comes back, or the image comes back, and I have to deal with it. So it's an ongoing negotiation. And literally what I'm trying to do is to take chaos, the seemingly messy, nonsensical marks, and make them into something that's readable, but only to an extent. I don't want them to be too finished. I want them to have a sense of being ongoing, never fully realized. They're becoming. They're always just becoming. I think this one's called A Professional Family of Grievers. They would travel through towns and grieve for you. These are 3-panel drawings, meaning they consist of 8.5 sheets, 8.5 by 11 sheets of paper, placed side by side. Same idea, I would take marks, and I have thousands of these marked up papers, and I would put some together to find a composition, to kind of visualize possible outcomes, and then the images would come. So you can see in the face, these are all just random marks that I had to somehow resolve. Same with the bodies. This one's called Child's Play. This one's called Glorious Pink Apparition. The pink is actually pinker than that. disappeared. Well, this was the one that started the scene in the tracing night. When people look at the work, they actually can't fathom whether it's drawn or printed because it has a print quality. And I like that in that I feel I'm a devoted drawer. And for me to stay fresh with it or to bring to drawing a sense of freshness, I have to challenge what drawing is. And drawing doesn't even necessarily have to be inked up like this. It could be something else, like a form in space, a performance. The idea is to keep it fresh, to always kind of unsettle yourself and push. Yeah. Some drawings are even much more opened up to play with a sense of movement, transformation, quite agitated. This is quite big, consists of 28 sheets of 8.5 by 11 sheets of paper. And I wanted the process to be transparent, so I'm in fact using the 8.5 by 11s and putting them together and build up a drawing. I will work on 3 or 4 this size at the same time because it takes a lot of time. Taking a lot of time only insofar as if I get tired, I would resort to marks and lines that I already know or images that I already know. I mean, they look like my drawings anyway, but I want to stay fresh, be alert, be more inventive, and find other ways to move through the space generated. So when I'm tired, I go to the next drawing, and if I'm tired, I stop and I do something else. It's amazing how easy it is just to resort back to what you're familiar with. So I think this one's called the Queen, and she's up there, and her skirt is hell, and she's holding up 2 figures. One thing I should mention here is there are elements of collage in the work. Because the drawing takes so long to do, sometimes while working through it, some of the figures feel like they don't want to be in that position where I place them initially. So what I do is I cut them out and move them to wherever they want to go. So that adds another sense of freedom that I don't have to be so feeling so precious about the way I'm working. In fact, there's ways to move around so that even if it's messed up, I can take sections of this and maybe place them into another drawing. This one is called the Wing Girl, and once in a while I have an image in my head and I just draw it. So this is one of those images. It didn't come from negotiating marks. I just had this idea that this girl would have wings that are her hair, and on it would sit these witches. And nowadays you see people working with animation, and there are some amazing animations. I saw yours. Museum London, it's great. And I work a lot, but I think I'm also very lazy in that I could never draw every cell and come up with an animation. So I'm thinking about a very efficient way to create a sense of animation. So what I did was, 2 years ago, I went to Shanghai, and I took my drawings with me. And I went to a kite maker, and I asked him to fashion kites out of my drawings so that I can actually create a real-time, performative-based animation. So wasn't done very well. He said, I can't do the heads, they're too complicated. And I didn't want the background, I just wanted her. But that's the best I can get. Anyway, and then the next one is a mermaid. I didn't have that made, but I actually bought one. They're so cheap, it's like $20 for this 8-meter high thing. Anyway, so I bought one, I kind of reconfigured her face. Anyway, so what's interesting about going out of my normal ways of working is I befriended all these kite flyers. They had a kite club. And they found out I was going to launch these kites at the People's Square. They all wanted to do it for me. And so there were like 20 of them flying my kites in a day that wasn't very windy. One thing that I wanted to do was to not treat them as kites, in fact. I wanted them to be these large, oversized, unwieldy monsters. So the only time I would really fly them is when it's really windy. So the minute I kind of throw them up, they want to wrestle with me. The minute I tug on them, they kind of fight and jostle. And I made a video called Wrestling with Demons, and that's what it was about, in a way. So I like the fact that these things animate a real space. They include me in the performance. And if viewers are willing, they can actually fly this. So the public becomes involved as well. And it's a spectacle at the same time. I think it's boring to just fly them and see them dangling kind of unmovingly in space. There's my dog boy again. I actually hand sold all the hairy tail bits. The ambassador for Canada actually came and flew this kite. But it wasn't very windy. I just said, run faster. That was the first one that was made. It was based on a sketch because I wanted to see how far they can push the image on their own terms. And once it was made, I asked for more color and details. Yeah, so this is called the snake goddess. Her tongue flickers, and she's 8 meters high. This is in Squamish, one of the windiest channels there. That was really exhilarating to just toss them up and they just want to take off away from you. I think I have one more image, one more work to show you. And it's a recent piece I did at Axnail Set in Gatineau, Quebec, just outside of Ottawa. I wanted to do a piece that was not about paper, not about things that they expect to see when they come into my show. And I had just spent this part of my summer in Sicily where I saw a whole bunch of burnt trees. Although when I made this piece, I wasn't thinking about that, but it came in unconsciously. I wanted to think about my paper cuts because I'm always using trees and how it can be translated into a three-dimensional form. I actually took branches from the nearby areas. So they're the real branches, but I had them wrapped in black cloth. And then the trunk is composed of a big tube with lots of bubble pads and wood to support the branches that are coming in. Everything's wrapped. The body is very much, I would say, the trunk is very much like a body. It's almost like the bottom is like the train of a skirt. And the reason I wrap them in black is because I want to play with video projections and shadows. And in the darkened space, this is actually not bad in terms of the way you will see it in the space. I wanted this form to be simultaneously a form and being formless, that it would be three-dimensional and flat like a silhouette. And that when it casts its shadow on the wall, the shadow had the same hierarchical kind of setup as the sculpture. I also had made 5 oval mirrors, and on each one there's a projection, and the mirrors rotate with a gentle breeze from a small fan. And they say, okay, I can show you this, I think. I don't know how fast I'll go. But literally, the fan would cause the mirrors to turn, and the video projections reflected off the mirror would rotate and cast their images in the space, circumventing the entire gallery. Not that fast, obviously, they're pretty slow. And because they're not driven by motor, it feels like these heads or these faces have their own mind. They will slowly congregate, linger, and then maybe turn and go the other way. It's quite mesmerizing. There was one girl who was in there and she wanted to sleep over that night. She was in there for 2 hours because the combination's always different. There's sound, and there are 3 2 other videos. Oh, actually, no, there are 4 videos. Okay, what I did was, after I've constructed the tree, I turned the lights on. So I had a cast shadow of the tree on one of the gallery walls. Okay, this is a close-up of one of the faces. I'll show you another one. There's a thing dangle in front of them, and they're trying to consume it. And I actually recreated that on the tree, so it feels like that projection. Oh, I can't really see it. Can you see this black thing hanging? Not really. Anyway, there are a whole bunch of dangling stuff in the tree, and it feels like these heads are trying to eat them. So in terms of the shadow, so I turned the light on, casted a shadow on the wall, and I shook the tree, and it was videotaped. Then I projected the videotaped tree moving back onto the tree. So at the same time that it cast a shadow on the tree, it also created a video shadow projection of the tree moving. But it doesn't happen all the time. So once in a while, the moving stops, that shadow image disappears. But the actual cast shadow of the tree is always still there. Even when the video is completely black, there's still a light hitting, so that I took advantage of a darkened light that casts a shadow. So within this other realm, the mirrors also rotate. So it just feels like there are layers and layers. It's on the other side as well. It's a bad photo. I took this one. It's very grainy. But on this opposing wall, I had some branches leaning against the wall. And the video is actually an image of me. So literally what I did was I had the video taping myself naked, and I would strike a match. And as the light goes on, it temporarily illuminates a part of my body. And also when it comes up as a video, it changes the color of the gallery space from cool blue to this warmth. And so it will illuminate, and then the flame will go out, and then it will be darkened again. But what was interesting for me was that when I lit the match, it felt like I was actually lighting the branches that were in front, leaning against the video. It's quite disconcerting to play with the illusions and the real objects. Another thing that was really beautiful was that I had to blow the flame out sometimes, because otherwise it would just burn to the end and burn my finger. So in the video, I'm going like really slowly to get the flame out. And as the flame dies, you get this red amber. And in the video, because I slowed everything down, it felt like they were souls traveling through space and disappearing. It was quite lovely. That may be it. I'm not sure. We'll see. Yep, that's it. So that's what I was working on. Oh, so I can conclude by saying that this summer I was at Manchester, and I was telling Leah the story. I was invited to make a new installation at the Chinese Art Center. So my assumption is that I had to deal with some Chinese-ness. So I started to do research into the history of the Chinese in Manchester. It has one of the largest communities per capita in the UK. And so I started to look at immigration, the history of immigration. I realized quickly that's not where my interest lied. It was more the illegal immigrants that interested me. And then now it became more than just the Chinese. It was anyone who isn't British, who isn't part of the UA, who, yeah, United, no, what is it? EU, sorry, who wanted to get into UK. So some of the words that came up consistently included ghost. The Chinese, I would say the legal Chinese who were residing in the UK call the illegals the ghosts because they had to maintain a sense of absence in this country, in that country. If they were to be found out, they would be deported. So they remain invisible. And the Chinese also call anyone who's not Chinese a foreigner, regardless of where they are. And they're also called kind of ghosts. So there's a play with who is a ghost. And there are also Punjabis that I saw who call themselves ghosts in that they had to also remain inconspicuous. What's interesting was that these Chinese illegals were never visible until something happened. There was a tragic situation where there were cockle shell pickers they went out to work during the worst situation, storms coming, visibility 0, but that was the only time they can pick shellfish because the locals had opposed them, thinking they're stealing from them. So, and they were always beaten up. So they went out during the worst conditions, and they all drowned. And while they were dying, well, they knew they were dying. They were standing on top of the vans, and they're calling back to China, not to the locals, asking for help, because that's how embedded in their thinking is that they cannot disclose their presence in this country. So the minute they drowned was the minute they became visible. So I like that. I like that sense of irony or the contrast. You know, before they were so low-keyed and you never even knew they existed. But it was through their death that they became completely in the forefront of all the news. And there was a movie made called Ghosts. And then one other sad situation was these Moroccan young men. They're called the burnt ones. I don't know if you've heard this term before. They're trying to get into the EU, and they had to cross the Moroccan Strait. And before they do that, they burned all their papers. Anything that attached a sense of existence, a prior existence, identity. And sadly, most of them drowned. So, and their bodies are never found. So they, just completely disappeared. Sorry. So my work, I'm trying to deal with not to illustrate the politics and the human tragedies, but they will be in the work. I don't want the work to be sentimental, romantic, and all that. But I'm playing with the notions of the invisible and all that, the shadows. So that's what I'm working on right now.